I'm Martin Sadler and I run HP Labs here in the UK.
Where do you see the future in 2020?
2020, we'll have another billion people online around the planet. That's taking people online that are not part of the current westernized middle classes. More people will have access than ever before. Sometime in the 20s, we could reach that point where more people are online than have clean water on the planet. That's kind of a scary thought, but it's so easy to bring the internet to people, and we are bringing more and more of the planet to the internet year by year, decade by decade. We'll have round about 50 million petabytes of information that we're dealing with by 2020. And our petabyte is the amount of information that you would use for a big online game like World of Warcraft globally. Everyone associated with playing World of Warcraft all the way around the world, 1 petabyte. We're talking about 50 million petabytes of information. That's a huge amount of information that we'll have to store, we'll have to process, we'll have to look after, keep it safe. In the world of consumers, we will have 30 to 50 billion devices that people are using, and on those devices we'll be running around about 20 million different apps for the smartphones, the tablets, and the next generation devices that come after them. These are huge numbers, and we haven't really internalized yet as a ICT community what those numbers will mean. But we can be sure that we are at the beginnings of the ICT revolution. You know, everything we've seen in the past 10, 20 years, we'll see just as much transformation over the next 10 to 20 years.
So, not looking too far ahead, what is the next big challenge? You're saying getting 1 billion people online. What sort of hurdles will that sort of number bring to?
So I think the big challenges are very much around 3 separate things. They're around big data. How do we handle all this huge volume of data? And in particular, as we start making our cities smarter, our homes smarter, we want more and more access to videos and social networking wherever we are. The big data aspects are one thing we have to get our head around and handle. The second area, of course, is that brings a whole host of security issues that we need to think about. How do we keep information safe? How do we keep information private that we need to keep private? How do we stop the people who want to exploit this world as it begins to evolve even further, exploiting us and taking advantage of us, particularly if we don't understand the technology? You know, many people coming online really have no idea how it all works and what they should do and what they can't do. So it's very easy for people who want to organize crime, others who want to exploit them, to get in. How do we stop that? How do we make it a safe world, an attractive world, so people get all the positive benefits without the negatives? And then thirdly, how do we actually do all the processing in this world? If you like, the world of the cloud that people keep talking about. How do we, look after the data, but be able to handle it appropriately? How do we move it to the right places so that people can take advantage of it in the right kind of ways, and just make it all kind of work by magic? We kind of want the processing to work by magic, it kind of gets stored by magic, and the security bit gets taken care of so you don't need to worry about it. How do we make this a really positive experience for everybody?
Now, obviously, that's looking 7 years in the future. How do you balance out between looking to the future and staying in, not in the reality, in the today as well, making technologies relevant and not too far off in the future?
So I think in labs what we try and do is kind of start with that further out picture, work out what the world's going to be like, work out what we can actually do with technology, what's possible, what isn't possible, what will we be able to do by a particular time frame, and then kind of work back in terms of, so what should we be doing today? What are the hard problems that we should work on from a research perspective, that if we could solve them now, the world will be ready? So in particular, around an area like security, you can predict the rise of certain kinds of attacks. You hear a lot on the media about, cyber warfare and cyber terrorism, and, almost every day there is a security story in the press. We can project forward, look at what's going to be the likelihood of all these extra billion people. 1% of the extra billion people is 10 million people. So imagine that billion coming online, imagine them being disenfranchised, or 100 million of them being disenfranchised in some kind of way. They don't have the right kind of political frameworks in the countries they live in. As I said, they may not have access to clean water. There will be issues that people care about. 10 million activists who care about a particular topic can be highly disruptive online if we don't know how we, on the one hand, give them a legitimate voice, all the upside of the internet, but also stop the bad stuff happening, stop people disrupting everyone else's lives online. So you kind of take that problem, look at it, look at the scaling, look at what we have to do, and then look at what are the options for how we might solve some of the challenges. And then that leads us into our particular research projects that we actually work on, you know, picking off a challenge. If we can do this today, the world will be ready in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years to be able to cope with some of the things that are happening. Or we can take advantage of things, or we can make something happen that we can't make happen today.
So what sort of particular areas, I mean, you've come back to fresh water, on, you know, people having access to fresh water. What sort of issues, other than the ones you mentioned, do you think the ICT industry should be addressing when it comes to the future?
I think one of the big challenges, ICT, people, you know, historically have thought of this as kind of like the back room, the engineering, you know, in the enterprise space it's often perceived to be quite boring, it's the people just making it all work, it's you know, electronic forms, it's not anything terribly exciting. But as we take our digital world and physical worlds and kind of bring them much more together and tightly integrate them, you're not going to be able to do anything without understanding the digital aspects of it, the cyber aspects. How does that interconnected world work? We're connecting everything and we're bringing everything online. And I think the people who are developing that technology, the people who are thinking about how to do that, will increasingly get pulled into the policy issues around this. But the last thing we need is politicians and others kind of deciding the way society will evolve because they don't understand the nature of the technology and how it's going to be integrated into everything we do. You kind of want the people who are the technologists fully involved and informing and taking part in the wider societal debates, helping policymakers understand the issues. And I think that's a big change that we will see from the past, where we've thought of, you know, people going to university and doing electrical engineering or computing and being very techy. I think we'll see a lot more crossover into social sciences and, you know, areas like politics, where it will make a lot of sense for people to be experts on big data and politics, you know, big data, you know, and some of the social science things, and the same with security, same with some of the things we're seeing around service infrastructures, around the cloud and so on. I think we're going to see much more interdisciplinary activity around ICT than we have in the past.
And touching back on the social side, and you're talking about the politicians and the embedded cities and all this sort of thing. How, I mean, you're always going to get a percentage of society who don't engage with new technologies, who aren't interested or don't have the education necessary to understand it. How do you think we're going to, as technology becomes ever more pervasive in society, you know, you're getting the benefits online and all that sort of thing. How do you think we need to go about engaging with those other people, with the digital skeptics, the digital avoiders, and people like that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think technology has one advantage over most other areas. We haven't divided society into the people who are pro and the people who are anti. By and large, for everything we're talking about with the digital world, most people are pro. You know, if you look at other areas in life around biology, around pharmaceutical, around, you know, all sorts of other aspects, society is often polarized into very different camps of people with very different views. Around technology, we've been very lucky, I think, in that hasn't really happened. By and large, everyone, you know, people might be more cautious at the rate that they adopt things. They might be more wary. They might want to see it, how it works before they adopt it. But by and large, everyone comes along and everyone adopts it. You know, everyone has a mobile phone. How many people do you know that do not have a mobile phone, that don't have, you know, TV, that don't have, you know, all these areas? Everyone likes to engage, I think, because everyone sees the upsides. Now, the best things we can do to help with that, and where I think BCS in particular can help, is around education. It is about making sure that youngsters understand these issues. If we educate young, take a very simple current issue like privacy of information. If we're educating, the children in our primary schools around issues and how they might want to think about their information and what it means, and what it means when they put photos online and things like that. If we do that in our primary schools, these people are well equipped by the time they get to secondary schools and move into the workplace. And they help their parents, they help their grandparents, they help others understand. I think we've long seen this where, the 6-year-old might explain to the grandparent how the video recorder worked, and then how the smartphone works, and oh look, here's a tablet, Granny, this is what you can do with it, this is how you use it. And I think we just need to keep that going. I think there's a real role for professional bodies to get away from just being, I don't think the BCS has been guilty of this particularly, but get away from just being the professional. It's for the whole of society. How do we get this message out to everyone and make everyone a participant in the digital world? And I think technology's done a pretty good job of that to date, and I think a lot of that is about bringing kids in. We bring kids into this environment all the time in here. We run events for them, we bring local schools in, and I think all of our counterparts around the country, different companies in ICT are all doing that. Everyone reaches out, brings the youngsters in, involves them, and I think it's a very healthy way of making sure that we don't end up in these bad situations.
Following on from that, obviously there's been a change in the past year in the way that ICT and is taught at schools, secondary in particular, with the move towards doing more computer science. Do you see that? What's your opinion on that change of direction? Instead of not necessarily learning how to drive the computer, but actually learning more about how it's made, how the software is coded, and things like that.
So some of that is really very good. I mean, I think I would like to see it go even further. And it's not, because it's not just about how to program; it's how to think about information. And I think for the future, it's not, as you say, it's not just how do I use a spreadsheet, how do I use an application, how do I use a device. It's I do need to understand how it works, and I think that's right. And I think teaching children to program is a very good thing. But we also need to teach them more than just programming. We need to teach them about the things that are the world of big data. What does it mean to think about lots of information? And this is, this crosses over into traditional areas of mathematics and statistics and things that, again, we haven't necessarily done a very good job of in schools. But a lot of that material can be brought down and made very accessible to quite young children, and I think we should just keep pushing and encouraging that. And even if that means, we need to spend a lot more effort teaching the teachers, training the trainers, making this material accessible to school teachers so that they can find it easy to actually teach this kind of material.
IT is obviously always, you mentioned it before, it's always seen as the back end, the back office type thing, but it's becoming more pervasive in all sorts of fields. You can't necessarily be a doctor without understanding how to use sort of computer records and such, and banking is heavily related to computing. Do you see a day when the IT doesn't really exist, it's just an all-pervasive part of just about every other profession going? Or do you think it will stay as an independent field?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think IT becomes more and more a part of absolutely every discipline, every occupation, every profession that is out there. That's absolutely true. But I think because we'll always be pushing, at least for our lifetimes, we'll be pushing the boundaries, we'll be working out more things we can do. I think we will actually see plenty of professionals. What we will see is new professionals. So, if you look at a professional body 10 years on from today, there may be a lot less programmers for a BCS or the other professional bodies. There might be an awful lot more data analysts, business analysts, people who are good at taking huge information feeds and understanding how to process them and deal with them and serve that information up to lines of business. So, a supermarket chain taking its loyalty card information. How does that information get recorded? Where does it get stored? How does it get processed? How do you ask the right kind of queries? How do you help the people making the decisions for what goes on the shelves in the supermarkets, and when do we stock them? How do you help those people do their job better because they have access to loyalty card information? So that kind of world of data science, of a mix of how do you do it, but also the how do you think about information, how do you analyze it, how do you ask the right kind of queries of it, get the right kind of answers out, how do you do that? I think those kind of jobs will be hugely on the increase over the next few years. So we'll probably see less programmers in the conventional sense, a lot more, if you like, data analysts, data scientists. In fact, we'll start talking about data scientists in the way that we've talked about computer scientists for the past decade.
You keep going back to the notion of big data. Do you see that as the next big the issue that needs to be fully addressed for the IT industry?
I think it's what's happening. It's this Moore's law of doubling every 18 months. We're just seeing more and more stuff, and more companies are realizing that the information available to them is information they can use, and that this is on every front. In science, we can do so much more by looking at the huge amount of information available. Everything all the stories in the news about how many planets are there out there in the solar system, not the solar system, how many planets are there out there in the galaxy. We look out. That requires very sophisticated processing of lots of data from telescopes to be able to do that. Personal genomics, understanding how to really tailor medicines for people based particularly on genetic information, huge amounts of information to process. So lots of science stuff. In the commercial world, tapping into all this information that's available. Smart cities, huge amounts of information that we can use to optimize the way cities operate to make people's lives much better. So I think all walks of life, we're seeing this explosion in information and people having ahas in how to actually use it. So I think it's happening already. We haven't completely internalized just how much this is going to transform society, but it is going to be an enormous transformation that we see over the coming years. And then around that, there are other technologies that will come off the back of that I think you will see being totally transformational for the way the world goes. So, our display technologies, how we think about information. We think about information in, smartphone-sized screens, or, this is what we see on our, notebooks, or, maybe we've got big TVs, but, we think of it in quite limited amounts. As we move to, new display technologies, we're going to wallpaper our homes in displays. We're going to go down the street. Everything is going to be an addressable display. We are going to have information coming at us from every which way, and we will think very differently about information in a world where we can see it all the time. So we can see it everywhere. You can think of those kind of earpieces and the glasses and all of these things which will be giving us head-up displays and constant information being fed into us. It's going to be a very, very different world.
And you mentioned privacy at one point, but then the huge amounts of data. Do you think maybe we should be going away from the privacy model to more of a transparency, in that the data's out there and we're willing to share it, but you have more control and more knowledge of where your data's going? So I'd say, yes, I've got this information, I'm happy to share it, but I just want to know where it's going, sort of thing, rather than me locking it down and nobody's allowed anywhere near it.
As we head to this data-rich world, I think we'll see a lot more attention paid to stewardship. Lots of different forms of governance. People won't just talk about privacy or security, they'll be talking about accountability, they will talk about transparency, they'll talk about other forms of governance associated with information. So if I'm a company and I give you my information, you might be a cloud provider, you might be doing some analytics for me, you might be using it in all sorts of ways. If I give it to you, I expect you to do the right things. I don't give it to you to lock it down and not do anything with it, and that's not why I'm giving you the information. If I'm sharing or I'm giving my information, I want you to do the right things, but I don't want you to misuse it. And so this is an extrapolation of what we see as individuals. So if I put my information out on a social networking site, I'm quite happy that social networking provider does certain things with my information. That's what gives me value. The fact that they connect me up with other people, they show me things, maybe even I'm happy with the targeted ads coming at me because I'm okay with that. What I don't want them to do is misuse it. I don't want to feel abused by what happens. And I think that's where everyone's at, companies, individuals, and I think we'll see a lot more sophistication around that. And you know, we're feeling our way forward in this space as a society, but we will come to some kind of norms, I think, and maybe we'll even come to global norms around what's acceptable and what isn't. And the companies that cross the line will find themselves in trouble, either regulatory, legal trouble, or just consumer trouble, in that consumers en masse move away from them and their businesses go away overnight. But definitely you want to share information, you want to share it with lots of parties, and you want them to use that information, but not to misuse it. And I think feeling our way around what constitutes use versus misuse is probably going to be where most of the debate is in the media around big data for the next decade or so.